Thank you, Jay. Thank you, panelists. We have some time for questions, so please make sure to identify yourself and ask a question as briefly as possible, an actual question.
My name is Alan Wissenberg. I reside in Germany. And Dr. Lehr, you mentioned 1980. That's the year I left this country. Been overseas, and I'm not here to defend anything that's going on in Germany in any forum. But I think I'm going to direct the question first to Dr. Armstrong. When I left, I had an excellent education at the University of Illinois. Through good teachers, I understood the scientific method. I understood what peer review is. I'm a little concerned, and I'd like you to comment, without being a biochemist or a climate scientist directly, but a forecaster. Do you think in 8 years, plus or minus a year, we can reintroduce the concept of scientific method and peer review to the satisfaction of the people here? I'm worried. I don't think we can do it.
It's not going to take 8 years. We can do it all with checklists. They do it in lots of fields where we know the science. If you're going to do medical science, you have to use the checklist. And if you don't, more people die. We know that the checklists work. If you mandate it, if you hire people and say, this is what we want you to do, they'll do it. Or they're not there any longer. I can hire people. You know, I can ask my students to do something. They don't like to do it. But if I ask, Mechanical Turk, or I hire people and I say, this is what I want to do, they do it. It's not a difficult thing. The only thing is, are we going to ask people? Why don't we tell people when we hire them, this is what a researcher does, you do it, and you hang on. If not, you don't.
I'm totally optimistic. I have little doubt we can do it in 8 years. I think we can do it in a lot less.
I think we can do it in minutes.
Yeah.
We have another question, and we're going to go till around 5:15 if the panelists will consent. Sure. Thank you very much.
Hi, this question is for Dr. Armstrong. I'm a statistician myself, actually. My name is Kevin Dyer-Rotten. I'm the Senior Statistician Research Program at the Heritage Foundation. You talked a lot about forecasting. I know you have extensive experience with that. I was wondering if you had any comments on paleoclimatological reconstructions where backcasting occurs and people try to essentially go backwards to forecast what temperatures were before there were any records, and the process regarding that. It's not so much science in the same sense because they're not experiments that they're doing, but rather they might be manipulating data. I don't know, but do you have any comments on that?
Perfectly reasonable thing to do. If you, it's done a lot of places, and it's another way of testing you're going out of sample. So that's what's important. So it's in my first book on forecasting, long-range forecasting. They talk about backcasting, I call it.
Yeah. But my question was, what is your impression of the legitimacy of paleoclimatological reconstruction?
I'm the forecasting guy. I hardly even understand, what you're doing.
My name is Eric Worrell. I write for What's Up With That. The question is, we've been hearing a lot about how some departments or sort of small parts of agencies have been obfuscated. So there's been accusations that it's been intentionally made difficult to sort of like root out all the climate activities of government. I'm wondering what you guys' impression is of this. If it is actually going to be difficult to identify some of these people.
Try it one more time.
Sorry.
I'm not sure I understood.
Sure. I've read several reports that people who are actually doing climate work for government agencies, their job titles and what have you have been obfuscated to make it difficult to sort of like identify and root out those particular functions. I was wondering, what your response is to that, if that's actually an issue.
There clearly is going to be a reduction in people working for the government studying climate. I mean, the one thing I'm absolutely sure of is that the Treasury Department is not going to be writing checks for climate research across the entire government at the level they have in recent years, which to my knowledge is about $6 billion a year. So there's going to be a huge reduction, and then the people whose titles involve climate are probably going to have to find work elsewhere.
Yes, hi, my name's Nicholas Lovesey. I'm one of the horrible lobbyists that try to run roughshod over everything. And my question is, as far the EPA's kind of an annoyance for my company, but things like the lawsuit with Exxon are the kind of things that really sort of keep us up at night. Do you have any policy or political insights into things like that? I know the chairman who spoke at lunch, I mean, his committee's doing everything they can on that front, but...
I think the Exxon lawsuit is absurd. For those of you who are not familiar with it, Exxon is being sued for covering up climate data. Like, they knew that the development of fossil fuels was impacting climate in a negative way, and the public will suffer. I think the lawsuit's absurd. I mean, they're suing them for something that Exxon could not possibly know. The idea that they were, I can't say they weren't covering up stuff, but I can say anything they were covering up wouldn't hold water.
My name is Jeff True. To what extent do you blame the Congress for abrogating its oversight responsibilities to get us to where we are now with the EPA? And what's to say that when the Democrats come back in, they don't do executive orders to put us right back where we are?
I would answer 100% falls on the Congress, and there's nothing to say if the Democrats get back in that we won't go back in that direction, but I'm just too optimistic. I think after 8 years, we're going to have a voting public that realizes their voice is being heard. They're going to be less frustrated with the government. I just, again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I can prove I'm the world's greatest optimist. You jump out of a plane every month for 40 years, and you're a little crazy and you're an optimist. But I really am optimistic that we're on a path that we're not going to relinquish.
Well, Jay,
I'm a little naive about this, but I thought the laws are supposed to be passed by Congress. I never understand in the first place how that changed, so it might go to the Supreme Court and solve that one. That's absurd.
Right. Clearly, to implement your plan, Jay, it would have to go through Congress. It'd have to become a statute, and that would be much harder to turn around, except unless another Congress came and turned it around. Question back here?
Hi, Steve Walsmock from Reality News. What are we doing to eliminate the grants from EPA and others, because this grant money is simply a transfer to provide money to the green groups to provide the politics to keep them in place. So is there part of your plan, Jay, in particular, or any of the other guys, to eliminate the ability of these agencies to provide grants to their political buddies?
In my plan, the states would be in control of grant money, and the collective of the 300 employees in the 50 states would make those decisions, as well as some at the various research labs. But frankly, I think that Scott Pruitt is going to be in charge of that. I would imagine he has the power as the new administrator of EPA to oversee all grants. And many of them are valid, and there's a lot of good money going to states to do good things. But he's in charge now, and I assume he doesn't have the power to fire everyone in EPA, which he probably should, but I think he does have the power to write the checks for grants.
Question over there.
George Mears, I think he just hit on a very important topic. Is there any appetite, you think, in Congress to come up with a bill that there's not a dime goes to any NGO without a 2/3 vote of both houses?
I don't think so. It's a wonderful idea. I mean, the NGOs, are part of the green machine, and it was brought up before that EPA gives grants to organizations to sue them so they can, do what they want to do, and that has to end. I can't imagine a law like that going through, but I think common sense is going to improve the flow of money out of the federal government.
Question up here.
Hi, James Morrison, UEA again. One of the concerns I have is what you're actually asking to do with the EPA is incredibly logical and reasonable, and that and politics don't go hand in hand. The other concern that I have, and I know how the environmentalists and the lefties think, and that is that they will immediately turn around and say, what happens when the major oil companies and major fossil fuel companies have an accident? And the problem is the state just does not have the funding and the legal power to actually take them on and say, you need to clean it up, because this was your responsibility, this was your land, this was your resource that you were extracting, it made a mistake, and actually, if you're going to create legislation that says, we're going to regulate the environment, we're going to make sure that it's done properly, you should also turn around and say to those companies, to a certain degree, you have a duty of care, not just to yourself, not just to the local environment, not just to the regional environment, but to the world, to clean up your mistakes. Because, hey, as an individual, I clean up my mistakes. So should companies. If they have an accident, they should stand up and go out, okay, that went wrong, let's try and do what we can to sort it out.
Well, I would think if a problem is of such a magnitude that you really have to go outside of your own state boundaries to get the funding to remediate and do what needs to be done, there probably is a need to have a federal activity opportunity to look into and to manage those larger disasters. Deepwater Horizon. I mean, we hope nothing like that ever happens again, but you certainly couldn't put all that responsibility on the state of Louisiana, for example, or Alabama, which is also on the Gulf Coast, or Texas. So there's probably some need to have some federal oversight template that can reasonably respond to those larger problems that just go well outside of the ability of the state to handle it. So there's a lot of work, I think, that would need to be done for us to really migrate Jay's idea into practical use. I applaud the idea. I'm very grateful that he spent the time to even think through it and try to get us into a new place. But as Sam pointed out, this is going to have to be a U.S. Congress sanctioned alteration, and they're going to need to think hard and long about it. But I don't think it's out of the question for us to really change the picture, and it needs to happen. It really does need to happen. So thank you, Jay.
There's a simple answer. Most every city I know has a rainy day fund. Some of you hear about a rainy day fund. I mean, it's a pot of money that you have to put to use when something unforeseen happens. And I think Dennis is absolutely right. And that's a great question. I mean, clearly there has to be a pot of money at the federal level when the states, for the reasons that you contemplate, just can't handle it.
Most states also have rainy day funds and surpluses that they can dip into. And also, we can't forget that there's the tort system, that when somebody commits an incursion into someone else's property and destroys their property, they're liable for it. And it's interesting that oftentimes they aren't held liable for it nowadays, and instead we go to regulators to say, in the first place, well, you can't do X or Y because it might create an externality. What we should do is say, do what you want, but if it hurts somebody else's property, you're going to pay. And that is a much more sensible system. We have time for one last question.
You get the last one.
Roger Bezdak, question for Jay. Jay, you perhaps facetiously indicated that HUD should be moved to Detroit. Are you not naive enough to believe that if that was the case, all the lobbyists in Washington who lobby HUD would not also immediately move to Detroit and perhaps even be more effective lobbying HUD in Detroit than they are in Washington?
I think only half of them would move. Life is soft in Washington, D.C., and not so much in Detroit. You're, of course, right. There would be a movement, but I think the pressure on HUD in Detroit or some such city would be considerably less than in Washington, D.C., because a lot of the lobbyists work for lobbying firms, and the people there work with a half a dozen different agencies. So, I mean, it is a concern, but I think it wouldn't be what you're implying.
Yeah, splitting up those firms could make them less efficient, which would be very nice.
Sam, could I make one?
Okay, yes, please.
One comment about rainy day funds. State of Kansas statutorily requires a 7.5% ending balance every year. I was in the legislature for 6 years, and we reached that moment once. And prior to that time, I don't think it happened for 25 years. So the rainy day fund idea was floated in our legislature and you know, really attempted to be enforced, but we had tough budget times every year that I was in the legislature, and we had, you know, one surplus out of that. So it's just a challenge, and I don't know the other states' situations, but we got to figure it out.
We're all grateful to you, the audience, for staying a little extra time, and to our terrific panel for their expertise.